Hey, we are back. This is letter 28, the commentary for it, and I've got Spencer here. He was in the first one. Hey, Spencer.
Hey, Jason.
So I have him back because he really is close to the Screwtape Letters, and he'll tell you more about it. I don't want to steal his thunder. All right, we are back at the patio. This is letter 28 in the Screwtape Letters. My dear Wormwood, when I told you not to fill your letters with rubbish about the war, I meant, of course, that I did not want to have your rather infantile rhapsodies about the death of men and the destruction of cities. Insofar as the war really concerns the spiritual state of the patient, I naturally want full reports. And on this aspect you seem singularly obtruse. Thus you tell me with glee that there is reason to expect heavy air raids on the town where the creature lives. This is a crying example of something I have complained about already, your readiness to forget the main point in your immediate enjoyment of human suffering. Do you not know the bombs kill men? Or do you not realize that the patient's death at this moment is precisely what we want to avoid? He has escaped the worldly friends with whom you tried to entangle him. He has fallen in love with a very Christian woman and is temporarily immune from your attacks on his chastity. And the various methods of corrupting his spiritual life which we have been trying are so far unsuccessful. At the present moment, as the full impact of the war draws nearer, and his worldly hopes take a proportionately lower place in his mind, full of his defense work, full of the girl, forced to attend to his neighbors more than he has ever done before, and liking it more than he expected, taken out of himself, as the humans say, and daily increasing in conscious dependence on the enemy, he will almost certainly be lost to us if he is killed tonight. This is so obvious that I am ashamed to write it. I sometimes wonder if you young fiends are not kept out on temptation duty too long at a time. If you are not in some danger of becoming infected by the sentiments and values of the humans among whom you work. They, of course, do tend to regard death as the prime evil and survival as the greatest good. But that is because we have taught them to do so. Do not let us be infected by our own propaganda. I know it seems strange that your chief aim at the moment should be the very same thing for which the patient's lover and his mother are praying, namely his bodily safety. But so it is, you should be guarding him like the apple of your eye. If he dies now, you lose him. If he survives the war, there is always hope. The enemy has guarded him from you through the first great wave of temptations. But if only he can be kept alive, you have time itself for your ally. The long, dull, monotonous years of middle-aged prosperity or middle-aged adversity are excellent campaigning weather. You see, it is so hard for these creatures to persevere. The routine of adversity, the gradual decay of youthful loves and youthful hopes, the quiet despair, hardly felt as pain, of ever overcoming the chronic temptations with which we have again and again defeated them, the drabness which we create in their lives, and the inarticulate resentment with which we teach them to respond to it, all this provides admirable opportunities of wearing out a soul by attrition. If, on the other hand, the middle years prove prosperous, our position is even stronger. Prosperity knits a man to the world. He feels that he is finding his place in it, while really it is finding its place in him. His increasing reputation, his widening circle of acquaintances, his sense of importance, the growing pressure of absorbing and agreeable work, build up in him a sense of being really at home in earth, which is just what we want. You will notice that the young are generally less unwilling to die than the middle-aged and the old. The truth is that the enemy, having oddly destined these mere animals to life in his own eternal world, has guarded them pretty effectively from the danger of feeling at home anywhere else. That is why we must often wish long life to our patients. 70 years is not a day too much for the difficult task of unraveling their souls from heaven and building up a firm attachment to the earth. While they are young, we find them always shooting off at a tangent. Even if we contrive to keep them ignorant of explicit religion, the incalculable winds of fantasy and music and poetry, the mere face of a girl, the song of a bird, or the sight of a horizon are always blowing our whole structure away. They will not apply themselves steadily to worldly advancement. Prudent connections and the policy of safety first. So inverterate is their appetite for heaven that our best method at this stage of attaching them to earth is to make them believe that earth can be turned into heaven at some future date by politics or eugenics or science or psychology or whatnot. Real worldliness is a work of time, assisted of course by pride, for we teach them to describe the creeping death as good sense or maturity or experience. Experience, in the peculiar sense we teach them to give it, is by the by a most useful word. A great human philosopher nearly let our secret out when he said that where virtue is concerned, experience is the mother of illusion. But thanks to a change in fashion, and also of course to the historical point of view, we have largely rendered his book innocuous. How valuable time is to us may be gauged by the fact that the enemy allows us so little of it. The majority of the human race dies in infancy. Of the survivors, a good many die in youth. It is obvious that to him human birth is important chiefly as a qualification for human death, and death solely as the gate to that other kind of life. We are allowed to work only on a selected minority of the race, for what humans call a normal life is the exception. Apparently he wants some, but only a very few, of the human animals with which he is peopling heaven to have had the experience of resisting us through our earthly life of 60 or 70 years. Well, there is our opportunity. The smaller it is, the better we must use it. Whatever you do, keep your patient as safe as you possibly can. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape. And that is letter 28.
The theme for today's Screwtape letter and Marlon de la Torre's study guide is preparing for heaven or earth. And the verse is from Philippians 1:21, which says, "For me to live is Christ and to die is gain." And the general theme here is death eventually comes to us all. We're all going to die, right? And I've said this before. We're all going to die someday. We do not know the hour or the day. Historically, mankind has had a fear of death. And death was brought to a clear understanding through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The crucifixion provided that foundation man can hold on to in preparation for our final resting place in heaven if we choose the path. And that's the scary thing is, going back to the death part, because nobody likes to talk about it. I don't. I'm not scared of dying because I know where I'm going to go, but I'm assuming I'll be 94 years old and just die in my sleep. We all assume that, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And
I'll be 96.
You'll be 96. But yeah, I assume that, and I know my little story real quick. My grandma and grandpa, she was dying, my grandmother, after, and it was not a really painful death. They had given her some things to help her. But I remember, I wasn't there, I just heard about it, but they have 6 children, and all 6 children were all gathered around my grandmother, and my grandpa was holding her in his arms. And he had just gotten done playing some songs on his guitar that he sang to her when they were teenagers, and dating. And, fast forward 60, 70 years later, they were married a long, long time. He was holding her and singing those songs to her again, and then he held her, and as she was dying and taking her last breaths, he said, I love you, Kate. I love you so much. And she's like, I love you, Frankie. You're my Frankie. And then she died, and it was just so beautiful. And he was very lonely without her, and he died simply from a hole in his heart. They didn't really know why he died. And so anyway, yeah, it's a good story, and it makes me kind of think fondly of them. Awesome Catholic family on my mom's side, really close, and they had their moments. Nobody's perfect. But anyway, with that, I'll hand it all over to Spencer, letter 28, just a commentary and what we can glean from this letter to apply to Lent and beyond.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me back again.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a very, I was hit very hard by the Screwtape Letters when I first read it, because I came to Christ later in life, and there was a lot of things earlier in my life that I had always noticed that I thought were weird, and actually seeing the Devil's Playbook, for hearing it, because I listened to the book. Actually hearing it was quite jarring to me and nerve-wracking, and this was one of the chapters that I remember as being especially poignant, and there's a lot to unpack. So Screwtape is counseling his underling through a somewhat unorthodox or I guess you could say weird circumstance where he's basically telling Wormwood that you have to keep your mark alive, and you're focusing on you're focusing on bodily death and destruction as something bad, and therefore something that you should aim at. But in reality, where our character is right now in the books, if he dies now, he's going to heaven, and because this is the point of for him up until this point is the point of maximal detachment from himself. He's thinking about his responsibility. He's thinking about his comrades. He's thinking about he's in a point of maximum maximal sort of I can't do this on my own, which war can does do you. It's hence the saying, "There's no atheist in a foxhole."
Yeah.
So it's so for me, I remember thinking, death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing that can happen is that you die not in a state of grace. Is that you die not in a state of friendship with God, and the spiritual forces that you're fighting against are aiming to have you die not in a state of friendship with God. Yeah. So a couple of things to consider is that long life is something good. I mean, and finding your place in the world as is mentioned in that chapter is a good thing. But if they take the place of God, that's when it goes bad. The four earthly goods: honor, pleasure, power, and wealth. Finding your place in the world, long, prosperous life. Those are good things. And I don't believe this chapter is cautioning us away from trying to live long, happy lives. As Catholics, we are called to advance the material standing and stature of our neighbors. So finding your place in the world, living a long, happy life, prosperous life, is not a bad thing. The danger is, especially moving from a place of as the main character as the main human character in the Screwtape Letters would, moving from a place of fear and dependence on God, being in a war, focusing on other people, moving from that place to a place of relative comfort and security offers more opportunity for temptation in a way that's not all that obvious. So that's something to definitely be aware of as we get older and find our place in the world, is remember that our place ultimately is not here. Yeah. That our place ultimately is with God. That being said, Catholicism and the duality, the sort of both and side of what I'm saying, is, I think, a message that's central, especially to the Catholic faith, is that it's not an either or some kind of bland compromise. We don't live partially for this world, partially for the next world, and we don't live like only for this world or only for the next world. We live fully for this world and fully for the next world. You should try as hard as you can to find your place in the world, to carry out your vocation, to carry out your mission here, but then at the end of the day, be detached from it and be ready to move on. And it's tempting when we read stuff like, when we read into the tactics of the devil, to kind of be a little bit too afraid. Mm-hmm. We should definitely have a healthy fear of the devil and his tactics. We're taught that in the Gospels. Fear not the one who can destroy the body, fear the one who can destroy both the body and the soul. So yes, we are taught to have a fear of Satan and of where he can lead us. But we can also have confidence in our salvation, and joy in our relationship with God, but also be sobered by the possibility that we could turn away from it. And I think that's why when the apostles asked Jesus, Lord, will many be saved? His answer is strive to enter in. In other words, stay in your lane and live it out day by day. Just every single day you have to work on drawing closer to God. And I think understanding that there is a potential in as you become more established, more comfortable, understanding that there is a blind spot there shouldn't draw us into despair or anxiety. It should draw us into motivation to grow every single day in our relationship with God.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad. You should have done more letters. Serious. That was awesome. No, it made me think, like, I have struggled with this before, just being scared of the next life. We have no clue what it's going to be like,
Yeah.
And will I still have my same faculties I have now, and remember everything? And, I remember that day, a couple thousand years ago when I was on the beach with Spencer or something. I mean, or will I forget everything when I get my new body? Like a brand new hard drive type thought, and so there's probably a lot of people out there that I can't be the only one that's thought this before, but just the next life and how it's going to be, and if it's instantaneous, what happens when we actually die? The processes when you die.
Yeah,
it's scary. The unknown is scary, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually know because
I was hoping
eye has
you
not
would.
seen.
I'm disappointed.
Ears
Spencer.
not heard, nor has it entered in the minds of head. What?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but obviously God wants to maintain our free will throughout the process. Otherwise, this part wouldn't be necessary.
Yes.
So I imagine C.S. Lewis talks about in The Great Divorce how our earthly existence becomes either a part of heaven if we end up in heaven, or a part of hell if we end up in hell. So our memories become whatever we end up making of them, essentially. Because I've often found in my life that you can look at the same situation through two different lenses. You can either focus on the bad or focus on the good, and you don't want to be like polyamorous. I think that's the term. You don't want to just pretend there's no bad, but you don't want to pretend that there's no opportunities. So I think the right way to go is to just accept and recognize the bad that's you're currently dealing with.
Yeah.
Whatever can be mitigated, find a way to mitigate it, and then just move on. And I feel like heaven is going to sort of be the completion of that process in terms of what our memories are here. Whereas, so things that even the bad things, if we end up in heaven, we're gonna remember them as the thing that ultimately got us to heaven, because it knocked us off of, it knocked us down a peg when we needed it.
Yeah. Thank you. That was awesome.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for joining us. It's getting dark. This is good. It's beautiful. So yeah, we are literally floating on the water right now. No, we're out
There's
of the...
no sand.
There's
no sand here whatsoever.
There's no spoon. No, we're actually out on Hickam Beach on the sandbar, and it's just beautiful. It's quiet, well, except for the jet over there. But anyway, thank you for joining us. This is great. We have 3 letters left. I can't believe it. Come a long way. Yeah, this is good. Praise God. In the words of Christophonic, have a painful Lent. Have a happy, painful Lent. But anyway, if you want to get a hold of me, as always, my email is jaygoodman.deepadventure@gmail.com. And if you feel in your heart to donate to this show, to future endeavors I am currently planning, I think it's going to be pretty cool. My Venmo is at jaygoodman75. So that's it for tonight. We are almost in the dark. So God bless you. Seriously, pray for me. I'll pray for you. And just hope you have a good rest of your evening. And we are out of here.
Hello. That was good.
That's awesome.
That's good.